Are you ready to make an impact? If yes, then stories are a brilliant way to do that. And storytelling in presentations can take your presentations up to a whole new level. Well, I can't tell you unless you have to experience it for yourselves, because it can make your presentation so amazing. Why? Because stories are just brilliant. We remember stories. As people, we connect to stories, and that is why if you use storytelling in presentations, your presentation will be remembered. And if you are ready to get started, then let's look at what is it that we are going to learn in terms of storytelling. We're going to be talking about why, what, how, where, what are the elements, what are the models, how do you structure, how do you use data, and then some great tips for you to do a killer presentation with storytelling. All right, let's jump in. So the first thing, why should you use stories? It's because as people, as humans, as social animals, we love stories. We talk to people, we love talking to others because of the stories, and we connect through stories. We relate to a lot of people because of the stories that they share, and it makes a difference in our lives. And which is why when you have something really important to share, storytelling can be a brilliant way to enhance that entire information that you are sharing with them to take it up to the next level. So, what do stories do? They entertain people, they educate, they inspire, they motivate, they simplify things. Complex analogies, complex technical pieces can be broken down into something so simple, and that way people are engaged, they are more interested because they feel that this story is going to just keep them so enamored that they're going to love listening to the entire piece. And you know what? At the end of it, they are engaged, and you have created the impact that you want. So, how do you use these stories? You can use them as examples. You can talk about stories that have happened in your life. True stories. You can create a story. You can talk about stories that have happened to others, and you can use those to share something which is maybe slightly complex, and it's just going to add that little bit of extra push. Wherever you want to drive a certain point, story could be a brilliant way to do that. You can also use them as analogies. Can you think of a simple process that people would definitely understand? Now, can you relate that to a more complex piece? Then this would be a great way to do that as well. Then thematic. Now, is there a theme to what you're sharing? Is there something that you're trying to share? Is there an emotion that you're trying to evoke in the other person? Based on this, you can also look at thematic stories certain ways. We are definitely going to look at a few models for that, and this will also enhance your entire presentation. And then finally, where do you use stories? This is a question that people always ask. They're like, okay, storytelling is great and all of that, but how do I actually put it into use? What do I do with storytelling? You can use them throughout your presentation, in the beginning, in the end, in your conclusion, throughout, in between, wherever you feel you need to drive certain points. Or you can actually turn your entire presentation into a storytelling model. Why not create a story or talk about a story that takes people through a journey through certain steps, and in essence that is your entire presentation? That could also be the case. So there are so many ways in which you can do stories. There is no hard and fast rule that this is the only way you're supposed to do storytelling when it comes to presentations. Now that we've got that out of the way, so let's jump into story elements. There are 5 simple story elements that you need to know. And if you think back to the stories that you have heard before, think back to the stories that people have shared with you, the ones that you've seen, you've watched movies, you've read books, you've heard from others, all of these, then you will be able to associate with these 5 elements. There is a theme, there is an overall theme that they're trying to convey, then there are certain characters, important characters, supporting characters, and then there is a setting. Is it a village? Is it a town? Is it in happening somewhere in a fantasy land? So what is the setting? And then finally, there has to be a conflict, or there has to be a problem. Without them, stories don't exist. A story doesn't get created. There is always a challenge that we talk about in stories. So a conflict is essential. When we say conflict, you don't have to take in the literal sense, but there is a challenge or a problem that we are trying to explain, or which is why the story exists in the first place. And then finally, a desire. What is pushing us? There is an aspiration that gets us to why do we want to do something, right? And this is important to the story. Having that conflict and the desire is what is going to help people go from one place to another and take that journey with you as you tell them that story. So, important elements, and these are things that you need to know about your story. And now let's look at models. When it comes to stories, there are certain themes or a certain way a story generally goes, and here are seven of them: underdog, rags to riches, journey, quest, comedy, tragedy, and rebirth. Now you'll be able to relate to some of these themes with maybe some movies and books that you've read, and well, that is the case. This is the concept of writing stories. So underdog is usually this person who is never considered that this person would do something, but this person eventually achieves. So here you see there is a problem, there is a conflict which this person overcomes, and ultimately his desire to do something. You know, this person who's always well disconsidered, it's not really considered as having high potential, but this person shows that that can happen. Rags to riches, from going from nothing to having an amazing thing, getting everything that you want in life. And that is a rags to riches story. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of those movies. A journey where you go on a path, you just take a journey with people, with certain people, and see how that unfolds. And in the course of the journey, you come across a lot of challenges, issues, and how do you resolve them. Then, as a quest is always in search of something, in search of a treasure, in search of something that we want, right? And it could be anything. It could be your independence, it could be finding yourself, it could be an actual treasure hunt. So all of these where a group of people or a certain person takes a journey, but it is more now like a quest to find something, then it becomes a quest. Finally, comedy. Now, this is how a person, in a very comical sense, the story unfolds, where they talk about how this person looks at his life or looks at his or her life and all the challenges that they face, but more from a comical sense, more from a comedy perspective, and how this person manages to go through that entire piece. Tragedy is when there is something sad that has happened, but there is a learning in everything, and that's exactly what it is. So even if the story doesn't have a great ending, there is a tragedy involved. You can still learn something from it, and that is what is tragedy. And rebirth is essentially someone who was not a good person, someone who did everything for all the wrong reasons, but in time realized what they were supposed to do and changed completely. And that's a story in itself. It's overcoming your own fears, your own problems, your own misguided ideas of the world, and then finally changing for the better. Now I'm sure you're able to associate with a lot of movies and books that you've read, and that's essentially what stories do. This is what they remind us. They bring back amazing memories for us. And if you want to do that, you can definitely use one of these story models. Now, you don't have to go looking for a certain model, but you can always relate an example in your life. So, for example, you're talking about using a new software and how this was a challenge, you did not want to do this, and how through the course of time, with some help, you realized how this can make an amazing difference to your business itself. Now, this is also a storyline, this is also a challenge, this is also a story model, and that's exactly what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave an infographic link for you below, and it's a beautiful infographic. I don't want to give you long reading material, so what I want you to do is go through the infographic. It talks about each of these story models, gives you examples, also examples in terms of workplace and actual presentations, and how can you implement this in your life to talk about stories that you want to share. And this will definitely bring a huge difference to your storytelling. All right, so take a look at that infographic once you're done with this module. Now, moving on, irrespective of the model that you choose, whatever storyline it is that you share, we need to at least ensure that we follow a basic structure when it comes to telling stories. And that is a 3C structure. Very simple, very easy to remember. It starts with context and then goes to conflict and then conclusion. But let's see what's context first. Context is the background, the setting, the theme. What is it that you're trying to say? Who are the characters? Where are they? What is the situation? Right? A little bit of detail to get your story started on the right note. And then comes the conflict, which is the actual problem. We've discussed about this, whatever issue or challenge that we're trying to talk about. So you go detail into how this person had this conflict, what are the challenges this person overcame, and then finally what did they do to resolve this conflict, fix the problem, fix and get a solution, and they got to where they wanted to be. So simple structure, very easy to remember: context, conflict, and conclusion. All right, whichever story model you use, you can always keep it simple with this basic structure. Now, why do you need a structure for storytelling? Now, this is a reason, because You can't just start telling a story for the sake of selling it, and then you'll be like, oh, I forgot to say, oh, there's another person, this happened somewhere as well. So now your story is very disconnected. It doesn't really help, and people who are listening to you are not able to go along with the connections that you're making on the spot. So it's always better to ensure that your story has a right structure, because people will then be able to go on the journey with you. And now let's look at how you can use data with storytelling and make your presentations even more effective. With data and storytelling, there are a couple of things that you need to first understand. Identify what is the purpose of this data. With data, you don't take the data, dump it, and then say, now what is a story that I can come up with. No, you'll have to look at it differently. What you need to do is determine the purpose of your presentation, which is your core message, and then say, okay, what is a story that I can build, right? What is a story that I can now construct? I can say that this was a project, it was dying, and it was not just working, and there were so many problems. Amplify it with numbers, add the numbers to bring more credibility, and then say how this was fixed. The journey that the entire team took to take this project and make it successful is a storyline, and you add data in all the necessary points to bring credibility and to create even better impact. So that's what you're supposed to do. Determine the purpose, build the story first, then add the evidence, which is your actual data. Take away all the unnecessary data, declutter, and start focusing on the most important pieces of data that you need. And then finally, resolve everything with your data, and keep adding data wherever you need to drive the impact, but don't add unnecessary data. All right. And this is how you can make data memorable by using storytelling. Now, this process that we spoke about, how to make data memorable, is the same three steps: context, conflict, conclusion. Start, give the context, tell them what was the purpose, why did we start, build the story, add the data, give the conflict, create the conflict, and then get into conclusion. And you can follow the same structure for this as well. Now, let's look at some final tips for storytelling. Start your stories with a little bit of detail, right? Give a little bit of small hints and figures, something that's going to make people feel that, okay, this is an interesting piece of information, or how this is how the story is starting. So you get into that. And then don't say true story, right? This is a true story, right? And let me tell you a story. People get bored the minute you start that. We don't say once upon a time anymore. They are boring. You know, there's a story coming, you're automatically like, not that in a great mood. So you don't want to say that. And saying true story doesn't mean that the rest of your stories are not true. So you don't want to create that kind of a thought in people. So you don't want to say true story. Just start with a nice detail and get into your story. One important thing is, it's great to create stories, it's great to take stories from others, but it's always amazing when it's your own story. Build your story first and then add the data. Don't take the data, dump it, and say, what can I create from this? Always go the other route. Don't add too much information. The numbers, the dates, the people, all of these things that you're trying to remember, people will not remember. They're going to remember the story. They're going to remember what the story made them feel. So all these details that you're trying to add, that you're trying to remember, please forget them. They are not required. You can skip and stick to the sense of storytelling. Just the basic details which bring in the credibility, and then you can remove the rest. Keep it short and ensure that you practice your story. Practicing your story, the reason why you do that is so that you can say, oh, wait, I forgot. So this also happened. Yeah. So you don't kind of mess up the structure, and you know that you are taking people on this brilliant journey, and ultimately they're going to learn something from this. All right. I hope this helps you create brilliant stories. And if at all you have any questions about stories, about storytelling, how to add data, you can always reach out to me and I'll help you out with this. Now, if you want to learn more about storytelling, definitely I'm going to give you the story models that you can take a look at the infographic, and that'll do. But if you want to go dive deeper into it, here's a mind map on storytelling. Now, if I had to create a presentation on this, this is going to be a day long presentation, right? It's got a lot of content, but I've given you the basics and just what you need without complicating it and without you just breaking your head. However, if you would love to know more about it, then definitely giving you another link where you can learn all about storytelling, more about storytelling, and even enhance it further. Now we are at the end of the first part, which is the planning. We are done with planning. We started with core message. We use the presentation pyramid to build a nice structure. And then we finally look at how do we add storytelling now. The reason why we add storytelling in the planning stages, when you're designing is not the best time to think about stories, or when you're delivering is not the best time to think about stories. If you want to add storytelling, you need to do it in the planning stage, because that's going to affect your design and the creation of your presentation itself. So it's better to think about how you want to include storytelling now than later. Because the minute you add storytelling, you might want to cut down on existing information, because storytelling will also take time. So any kind of audience interaction method that you use will definitely take away from the time of your presentation. So it's better to do this in the planning stage, cut down all unnecessary pieces and keep it just right, so that you can then move on to the design phase. So here is where I have a task for you. The task is for you to create an outline of your presentation. You don't have to design the presentation. You can create an outline of the presentation if you're a beginner. If you want to take it a next level, if you want to try a little bit more advanced, then you can see how you would add the concept of storytelling. And if you have data, even more better, you can see how you can implement data and storytelling with it. Go at it phases. If you're a beginner, stick to an outline that you can use Miro for, or mind mapping, basic mind mapping, and then you can add storytelling. And then if you can add data and storytelling, that would be even more amazing. I hope that you love this particular first part and that you're excited for the next, like I am. Don't miss out on creating this outline. This is going to help you then next design things. Okay, so take some time, create the outline, and then come back to this course and go to the next video. I'll see you in the designing phase. Bye.